The telegram arrived at the Boston Botanical Society on a Wednesday morning in March of 1883. And within the hour, Willow Bryant had packed her leather satchel with notebooks, pencils, and a determination that had carried her through 4 years of university, when most women were expected to marry and keep house. "You cannot be serious about traveling to Arizona Territory alone," her mentor, Professor Whitmore, said, peering at her over his spectacles. "The desert is no place for a young woman of 23, regardless of her academic credentials." Willow smoothed the telegram against her worn desk, reading again the invitation from the territorial governor's office requesting a botanical survey of native medicinal plants near the small settlement of Seligman. "With respect, Professor, I did not earn my degree to catalog greenhouse specimens. The Yavapai people have used these plants for centuries. If I can document their properties before the knowledge is lost, I will have done something meaningful." He sighed, recognizing the same stubborn streak that had gotten her admitted to the university in the first place. "Very well. But wire me weekly, or I shall alert every marshal between here and the Pacific." 3 weeks later, Willow stepped off the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad onto a wooden platform that vibrated with heat. Seligman, Arizona Territory, was little more than a collection of sun-bleached buildings scattered along the railway line, surrounded by endless stretches of high desert dotted with juniper and sagebrush. The April sun beat down with an intensity that made her Boston wool traveling suit feel like a furnace. "Miss Bryant," a weathered man in a sheriff's badge approached, thumbs hooked in his belt. "I am Sheriff Donovan. Got word you would be arriving. The boarding house is just down the street. Mrs. Chen runs a clean establishment." "Thank you, Sheriff. I will need to hire a guide familiar with the surrounding territory. I am here to study the native flora, particularly plants with medicinal applications." The sheriff scratched his jaw. "Well now, that is a tall order. Most folks around here are concerned with cattle, not cactus. Though I suppose you might talk to Gideon Ross. He owns the largest ranch in the area, about 10 miles north. Man knows this land better than anyone, been here since before the railroad came through." Willow made note of the name in her journal. "Is he amenable to visitors?" "Gideon, hard to say. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is fair-minded. Lost his wife about 5 years back. Childbirth took them both, her and the baby. He has not been quite the same since, but he is a good man." The information settled heavy in Willow's chest, the kind of tragedy that reshaped a person entirely. "I see. Well, I shall make inquiries tomorrow after I have settled in." Mrs. Chen's boarding house proved to be exactly as advertised. A simple but immaculately kept 2-story building with whitewashed walls, and a small garden that somehow thrived despite the arid climate. The proprietor, a Chinese woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an efficient manner, showed Willow to a corner room with a window overlooking the main street. "You stay long?" Mrs. Chen asked, setting fresh linens on the narrow bed. "Several months if my research proves fruitful." "I am studying native plants." Something flickered in Mrs. Chen's expression, interest perhaps. "My grandmother was herbalist in Guangdong. Here, desert plants different, but some I learn. Creosote bush for infection, prickly pear for many things." Willow's exhaustion evaporated. "Would you be willing to share your knowledge? I am documenting traditional uses of indigenous plants." Yes, but first you rest. Desert not like Boston. Must move slow, drink much water." That night, Willow lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds. The distant yip of coyotes, boots on boardwalks, occasional laughter from the saloon down the street. She thought of her small apartment in Boston, her colleagues at the Botanical Society, the life she had left behind with surprising ease. There was something about this stark landscape that called to her, a simplicity that cut through the ornate complications of Eastern society. Morning arrived with a knock at her door, and a basin of water delivered by Mrs. Chen's teenage son. Willow dressed in her most practical clothing, a simple cotton dress in deep blue, and ventured out to arrange transportation to the Ross Ranch. The livery stable owner, a barrel-chested man named Thompson, looked skeptical when she explained her destination. "You got business with Gideon Ross. I hope to discuss a potential employment arrangement. I need someone familiar with the local terrain to assist with my botanical survey." Thompson whistled low. "Well, I can rent you a horse and rig, but I cannot guarantee Gideon will see you. Like I said, he keeps to himself." "I shall take my chances." The road north proved to be little more than twin ruts in the red dirt, winding through high desert country that took Willow's breath away despite the dust coating her skin. Massive rock formations rose in the distance, painted in shades of crimson and amber. Sagebrush stretched in every direction, punctuated by twisted juniper trees and the occasional towering saguaro cactus, their arms raised like sentinels. She had studied botanical illustrations, read countless descriptions of southwestern flora, but nothing prepared her for the reality of it. Every few minutes, she stopped to examine something new. The delicate purple flowers of a scorpion weed, the silvery leaves of desert marigold, the thick protective spines of various cacti species. Her notebook filled with sketches and observations. So absorbed was she in documenting a particularly fine specimen of brittlebush that she did not notice the rider until his shadow fell across her page. "You are on private land." Willow looked up, shading her eyes against the noon sun. The man sat astride a buckskin horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than out of it. He wore dusty work clothes, a wide-brimmed hat, and an expression that suggested he did not appreciate interruptions. "Mr. Ross." She ventured, standing and brushing dirt from her skirt. His eyes, she noticed, were an unusual gray-green like sage after rain. "That depends on who is asking and why they are trespassing." "Willow Bryant from the Boston Botanical Society. I sent a letter 3 weeks ago inquiring about your availability as a guide, though I suspect it has not yet arrived. The post can be unreliable." A guide. He dismounted in one fluid motion, and she realized he was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard physical labor every day. His face was weathered, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of lines that came from squinting into the sun. "For what purpose?" "I am conducting a survey of native medicinal plants for the territorial governor's office." "Sheriff Donovan suggested you were the most knowledgeable person in the area regarding the local flora and fauna." Something shifted in his expression, though she could not quite read it. "Donovan sent you out here alone." "Not exactly. I hired a rig from the livery." "That is not what I meant." He scanned the horizon with practiced ease. "It is not safe for anyone unfamiliar with the territory to travel alone, much less a woman from back east." Willow straightened her spine. "I assure you I am quite capable. I have a degree in botanical sciences from Harvard University, and I have conducted fieldwork in the White Mountains and throughout New England." "Can you shoot?" "I beg your pardon, a gun. Can you shoot one?" His tone was not mocking, merely practical. "I fail to see what that has to do with botanical research." Gideon Ross sighed, removing his hat to wipe his brow. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, curling at his collar. "Miss Bryant, the plants you want to study do not grow along the main roads. They are in the backcountry, where there are rattlesnakes, mountain lions, the occasional hostile drifter, and terrain that will kill you if you are not careful. So I ask again, can you shoot?" The reality of her situation settled over Willow like a cold blanket. "No, but I can learn." For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "At least you are honest. Come up to the house. We can discuss terms." He gestured for her to follow, and Willow gathered her materials quickly, scrambling back into the hired rig. The Ross ranch house appeared after another mile, a low, adobe structure built into the landscape rather than imposed upon it. Cottonwood trees provided shade near what appeared to be a spring, and several outbuildings dotted the property. Cattle grazed in the distance, red and white shapes against the tawny earth. Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable, with thick walls that kept out the heat and simple furniture built for function rather than fashion. A Mexican woman in her 40s emerged from what Willow assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Rosa, this is Miss Bryant from Boston. She wants to hire me as a guide. Can you put together some lunch?" Rosa's dark eyes assessed Willow with frank curiosity. "Of course, Senor Gideon." "Welcome, Miss Bryant. You are very far from home." "Thank you. Your home is lovely." Over a meal of beans, fresh tortillas, and surprisingly tender beef, Willow explained her project in detail. She needed to document at least 50 native plant species, including detailed illustrations, habitat information, traditional uses, and collection of specimens for preservation. The work would take at least 3 months, possibly longer. Gideon listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "I will do it on 3 conditions. First, you follow my instructions exactly when we are in the field. Second, you learn to shoot well enough to defend yourself. Third, you understand that ranch work comes first. If something needs my attention here, the botanical survey waits." "Those terms are acceptable, though I would like to add one of my own. I need access to any knowledge you have about traditional plant uses. The Yavapai people who lived here before, how they used the native species, any information you can provide." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "There is still a Yavapai community about 30 miles west. I know some folks there. I can arrange an introduction, but that is up to them whether they want to share." "That would be invaluable, thank you. We start tomorrow at dawn. Wear practical clothes, bring a hat with a wide brim, and expect to be in the saddle most of the day." "Rosa, can you outfit Miss Bryant with one of the spare rifles?" Rosa nodded, though her eyes danced with something like mischief. Senor Gideon, I think this will be very interesting." Back in Seligman that evening, Willow felt the weight of what she had agreed to. She had never been on a horse for more than an hour, had never fired a gun, had never spent significant time in genuine wilderness. But as she watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and violet, she felt no regret. This was why she had come west, not just for plants but for the challenge of pushing past her limitations. Mrs. Chen helped her acquire more appropriate clothing. Split riding skirts, lightweight cotton blouses, sturdy boots. "You be careful," the older woman said, pinning up the hem. "Gideon Ross, he is good man but sad man. You be kind to him." Willow met her eyes in the mirror. "I am here for botanical research, nothing more." Mrs. Chen's skeptical sound suggested she had her own opinions on the matter. Dawn arrived cold and clear, the desert air sharp enough to make Willow's lungs ache. Gideon was waiting at the livery with 2 horses already saddled, along with a pack mule loaded with supplies. He assessed her new attire with a brief nod of approval. "You ever ridden astride?" "No, only side saddle. It is easier once you get used to it. This is Juniper." He indicated a gray mare with kind eyes. "She is steady, will not spook easily. Keep your heels down, sit deep in the saddle, and she will take care of you." The first hour was agony. Willow's legs screamed protest at the unfamiliar position, and she was certain she would fall at every step. But Gideon was patient, offering quiet corrections without making her feel incompetent. Gradually, she found a rhythm, her body learning to move with the horse rather than against it. They stopped at a rocky outcropping where she spotted several species of interest. Penstemon with its tubular red flowers, a type of wild buckwheat, and what she thought might be a variety of milkweed. Gideon watched as she made detailed sketches and notes, occasionally offering observations. The Yavapai use the milkweed sap for warts and skin conditions, he said, but you have to know which species. Some are toxic. How do you know this? I worked as a scout for the army for a while before I started ranching. Spent time with various tribes. They knew things about surviving in this country that we are still trying to learn. His expression darkened. Of course, the army was not interested in learning. They were interested in removing. Willow looked up from her notebook. You did not agree with their methods. No, I did not. That is why I left. He turned away, clearly done with that particular topic. We should keep moving. There is a canyon about 2 miles east where several medicinal plants grow near a seasonal creek. Over the following weeks, they fell into a pattern. Gideon would collect her before dawn, and they would ride into the backcountry, sometimes taking lunch with them and not returning until sunset. He taught her to read the landscape, to find water by watching where birds flew, to identify plants not just by their flowers but by their growth habits and preferred environments. In return, she shared what she knew from scientific study. The Latin classifications, the botanical structures, theories about why certain plants thrived in specific conditions. Their conversations ranged from technical discussions of root systems to broader questions about the relationship between people and the land. Back east, we think of nature as something to be controlled, Willow said one afternoon as they rested in the shade of an ancient juniper. Gardens are trimmed and shaped, wild spaces are cleared for agriculture, but here it feels different, like the land is indifferent to human desires. Gideon passed her the canteen. It is. The desert does not care if you respect it or not, it simply is. You either learn to work with it or you do not survive. Is that why you stayed, after your wife? She trailed off, realizing too late that she had overstepped. His face went still. Rosa talks too much. It was Sheriff Donovan, actually, I apologize. That was inappropriate. Silence stretched between them. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals in the cloudless sky. Finally, Gideon spoke, his voice rough. Catherine hated it here. Missed Philadelphia, missed trees and rain and seasons that actually changed. She was pregnant when she realized she could not go back, that I would never leave the ranch. I think maybe she gave up after that. He took a breath. The doctor said there were complications, that even in a big city hospital the outcome would likely have been the same. But I will never know if that is true. Willow wanted to offer comfort but sensed that platitudes would be worse than silence. I am sorry, she said simply. That must be a heavy burden to carry. It is. He stood, brushing dust from his pants. We should move, storm coming in from the west. She looked at the clear sky in confusion, but Gideon was already gathering their gear. Within an hour, clouds had materialized on the horizon, building into towering thunderheads that turned the afternoon dark as evening. They made it back to the ranch just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. You will stay here tonight, Gideon said, leading the horses into the barn. Roads will be impassable until morning. Rosa appeared with blankets and bustled Willow into the house. The rain is good, we need it. But yes, too dangerous to travel at night in the mud. I will make up the spare room. The storm broke overhead with impressive fury. lightning illuminating the landscape in stark flashes, thunder rattling the windows. Willow stood on the covered porch, watching water pour from the sky, transforming the dusty earth into 1,000 tiny rivers. Gideon joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "First real rain you have seen out here." "Yes, it is magnificent. It is necessary. Everything here has adapted to long dry periods followed by brief, intense wet ones. The seeds know to sprout quickly, to bloom and set seed before the water is gone again. Cattle can smell rain from miles away." They stood in companionable silence, sipping coffee and watching the storm. Willow was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the quiet strength he carried, the way his hands curled around the cup with surprising gentleness for someone who worked with them so hard. "Why did you really come here?" he asked suddenly. "Most people with your education, your background, they stay back east where life is comfortable." Willow considered her answer carefully. "Because comfortable is not the same as meaningful. I could spend my life cataloging specimens other people collected, writing papers about plants I had never seen growing wild. Or I could do something that matters, preserve knowledge before it is lost. Besides," she added with a slight smile, "I was tired of being told what I could not do." "Fair enough." He set down his cup. "Tomorrow, if the weather clears, we start shooting lessons. You have been out here long enough now. You should know how to protect yourself." The lessons began 2 days later in a small canyon on the ranch property where the sound would not disturb the cattle. Gideon set up tin cans on a fallen log and handed Willow the rifle Rosa had selected, a Winchester that felt impossibly heavy in her hands. "First rule, always assume it is loaded. Second rule, never point it at anything you do not intend to shoot. Third rule, respect what this can do. It is a tool, but a dangerous one." He showed her how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze rather than jerk the trigger. Her first shot went wide, the recoil bruising her shoulder. The second missed entirely. By the 10th, her ears were ringing despite the cotton wadding, and she wanted to throw the gun into the canyon. "I am terrible at this," she said, frustration sharp in her voice. "You have fired exactly 10 shots in your entire life. Give yourself some grace." He moved behind her, adjusting her stance. "Relax your shoulders. The tension makes you pull to the left." His hands on her arms sent unexpected warmth through her body, a reaction that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. Willow forced herself to focus on the target, on her breathing, on anything other than Gideon's proximity. The 11th shot clipped the edge of a can, sending it spinning. "There," he said, satisfaction in his tone. "Do that again." By the end of the afternoon, she was hitting the targets more often than not, though her shoulder ached and her hands shook with fatigue. Gideon seemed pleased, offering rare praise as they packed up. "You learn fast. Another few sessions and you will be proficient enough." "Proficient enough for what?" "There is a place I want to show you further into the backcountry. 3 or 4 days' ride. Some of the most diverse plant communities in the territory. But it is remote and we will need to camp. I wanted you comfortable with a firearm first." Willow's heart raced at the prospect, equal parts excitement and trepidation. "When would we go?" "Next week, if you are willing. Rosa can handle things here for a few days." That evening, as Willow soaked her bruised shoulder in a hot bath at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, she tried to sort through her tangled feelings. The work was going well, better than she had hoped. Her notebooks were filled with detailed observations, and her skill at field identification had improved dramatically under Gideon's tutelage. But it was more than that. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments, remembering the way he moved through the landscape with unconscious grace, the rare smiles that transformed his weathered face, the gentleness with which he handled injured animals or damaged plants. He was nothing like the men she had known in Boston with their polish and pretense. Gideon was direct, honest, shaped by this hard country into something solid and real. Mrs. Chen knocked softly on the door. "Water still hot? I bring more." "No, thank you. This is perfect." "You look different," the older woman observed. "Desert agree with you?" Willow met her knowing gaze. "I think it does." The preparations for the extended trip consumed the next week. Gideon assembled supplies with meticulous care. Food that would not spoil, medical supplies, extra ammunition, tools for any emergency. Willow packed her botanical equipment, extra notebooks, and the growing collection of pressed specimens. They left on a Wednesday morning, the pack mule loaded heavy, Juniper moving with her steady, even gait beneath Willow's increasingly confident seat. The ranch disappeared behind them as they headed into higher country, following game trails through pinyon pine and juniper forests. Gideon taught her to read signs. The scratch marks on a tree indicating a bear, the disturbed earth where Javelina had rooted for food, the scattered feathers marking where a hawk had taken prey. The landscape revealed itself in layers, a complex narrative written in stone and soil and vegetation. That first night, they made camp in a small meadow beside a spring that bubbled from a crack in the rocks. While Gideon tended the horses and built a fire, Willow explored the immediate area, discovering a magnificent stand of sacred datura in full bloom, their white trumpet flowers opening as dusk fell. "Do not touch those," Gideon warned, seeing her interest. "Every part of that plant is poisonous." The Yavapai and Apache use it in vision ceremonies, but it has to be prepared exactly right or it will kill you. Willow made careful notes, sketching the flowers in the fading light. The botanical name is Datura rhytii. There are several species, all with similar properties. The alkaloids affect the nervous system. All I know is I saw a man who ate the seeds by mistake. He spent 3 days convinced he was being chased by demons, nearly ran off a cliff before we could restrain him. She looked up, startled. "Did he survive?" "Barely. Took weeks to fully recover, and he was never quite right after that." Gideon stirred the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the darkening sky. "That is what I mean about this land. Beauty and danger all mixed together." They ate a simple meal of beans and hardtack, washed down with coffee that Willow had learned to make strong enough to strip paint. The night settled around them, vast and alive with sound. Crickets, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through pine needles. "Tell me about Boston," Gideon said suddenly. "What is it like living in a city that big?" Willow wrapped her hands around her tin cup, considering. "Crowded. Noisy. The streets are always full of people, carriages, vendors selling everything imaginable. There are museums, libraries, concerts. In winter, the snow turns everything beautiful for about a day before it becomes gray slush. Spring is glorious, though, when the common greens up and the trees bloom. Sounds overwhelming. It can be, but there is a kind of energy to it, all those people pursuing their lives and dreams. I suppose I loved it until I did not anymore. What changed? I realized that, for all its sophistication, Boston was not going to let me be anything more than an eccentric spinster with a degree she would never truly use. Here, at least, people care more about what you can do than what you are supposed to be. Gideon poked at the fire. That is giving frontier society too much credit, plenty of prejudice to go around, but I take your meaning. There is a freedom in the space, in the anonymity. You can reinvent yourself if you are brave enough. Is that what you did? Reinvent yourself? I tried. Then Catherine happened, and I thought maybe I could build something permanent, a family, a legacy, when that fell apart. He shrugged. I suppose I have been in limbo since then, running the ranch because I do not know what else to do. Willow heard the loneliness in his words, recognized it because she carried her own version. I think you are doing more than you realize. This land, the work you do, it matters. Maybe. He stood, clearly uncomfortable with the turn of conversation. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow is a hard ride. She wanted to say more, to push past his defenses, but wisdom held her tongue. Instead, she rolled out her bedding near the fire while Gideon checked the perimeter of their camp. Lying beneath more stars than she had known existed, Willow acknowledged what she had been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Gideon Ross. The realization should have terrified her. She barely knew him. Their lives could not be more different, and he was still clearly mourning his late wife. But her heart, it seemed, was unconcerned with logistics. The second day brought them into true wilderness, country where few people ventured. They rode through narrow canyons where red rock walls soared hundreds of feet overhead, crossed high meadows carpeted with wildflowers, navigated forests of massive ponderosa pines that filled the air with vanilla-scented sap. Willow cataloged species as fast as her hand could move: Indian paintbrush, lupine, columbine, species of wild onion and buckwheat she had never seen. Gideon watched her work with quiet interest, occasionally offering information about how various animals used the plants or how weather patterns affected blooming cycles. You really love this, he observed as she painstakingly sketched a particularly fine specimen of penstemon. I do. There is something perfect about plants, the way they have adapted to their environment over millennia. No wasted effort, every structure serving a purpose. They are honest in a way people often are not. Is that why you prefer them to people? Willow laughed. I do not prefer them exactly. But plants do not expect you to be anything other than what you are. They do not care about your gender or your unconventional choices. For what it is worth, I think your choices are worth defending. She met his eyes, seeing sincerity there, and something else she could not quite name. Thank you. That means more than you might think. They made camp that night beside a stream that sang over smooth stones, in a grove of aspen trees whose leaves fluttered like coins in the evening breeze. While Gideon caught trout for dinner, Willow explored upstream and found a plant that made her cry out in excitement. What is it? Gideon appeared at her side, hand on his pistol, scanning for danger. Echinacea, purple coneflower, but a variety I have never seen before. This could be a new subspecies, or at least a significant range extension. She was already sketching frantically. The petals are more deeply colored, and look at the central cone. The structure is slightly different. He relaxed, a smile tugging at his mouth. You scared 10 years off my life over a flower. Not just a flower. Echinacea has incredible medicinal properties. The native peoples used it for everything from snake bites to infections. If this is a distinct variety, it could have unique applications. She realized she was babbling and forced herself to slow down. I am sorry, I get carried away. No, it is good to see someone that passionate about their work. He crouched beside her, studying the plant. There is a whole stand of them here. We can collect seeds. Take cuttings if you know how to preserve them. They worked together as the light faded, Willow directing him on proper collection techniques, Gideon providing muscle and precision. His hands, she noticed, were surprisingly deft despite their rough appearance, gentle with the delicate plant material. Over dinner, Willow told him about her university days, the professors who had tried to discourage her, the few who had championed her work. The moment she had realized she could make a real contribution to botanical science. Gideon listened intently, asking questions that showed he was truly engaged. You had every reason to stay back east where you would be safe and comfortable, he said. Coming out here, that took real courage or real stubbornness. Sometimes I am not sure there is a difference. There is. Stubborn is refusing to admit when you are wrong. Courage is being scared and doing it anyway. By that definition, you are one of the bravest people I know. He looked uncomfortable. I just do what needs doing. That is not true. You could have hired ranch hands to run this place, moved somewhere easier. Instead, you stayed, even though it hurts because you made a commitment. She hesitated, then added softly, "That takes a different kind of courage." Gideon was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Sometimes I wonder if I am staying because I am brave or because I am afraid. Afraid that if I leave, if I let go, then everything that happened was for nothing. It was not for nothing. You loved her. That matters. Did I, though? The words burst out of him, raw and painful. Or did I love the idea of her, of building something here? Catherine knew, I think. She knew she was second to the ranch, and that killed something between us long before the pregnancy. Willow ached for him, for the guilt he had been carrying. You cannot change the past. You can only decide what to do now. And what do you think I should do? The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Willow knew her answer, knew what she wanted him to do, but fear held her silent. Finally, she said, "I think you should forgive yourself, for all of it." He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. The walls he had maintained so carefully began to crack, revealing the loneliness and longing beneath. "Willow, A scream split the night, high and feral, raising every hair on Willow's body. Gideon was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Mountain lion," he said quietly. "Probably a good distance away, sound carries out here, but we should keep the fire going strong tonight." The moment between them had passed, leaving Willow frustrated and uncertain. They took turns keeping watch, feeding the fire, though the cat never approached. When dawn finally came, Willow felt exhausted, though whether from lack of sleep or emotional turbulence, she could not say. The third day brought them to their destination. A high valley cradled between two ridges, fed by a spring that created a small marsh surrounded by lush vegetation. Willow had never seen such botanical diversity in one location. Sedges and rushes grew in the wet areas, giving way to willows and alder, then transitioning to the drought-adapted species of the surrounding slopes. "How did you find this place?" she asked, already unpacking her equipment. "I was tracking a lost calf about 6 years ago, followed it up here. Came back a few times since. There is something peaceful about it." They spent the entire day in the valley, Willow working with single-minded focus while Gideon maintained camp and hunted. By evening, she had documented 17 species, including several she suspected were rare or endemic to this specific habitat. That night, exhausted but satisfied, they sat by the fire sharing the rabbit Gideon had prepared. The stars emerged in their millions, the Milky Way a river of light overhead. "I have been thinking about what you said," Gideon began, not looking at her. "About forgiving myself. I am not sure I know how." Willow set down her plate. "I think it starts with accepting that you are human, that you made mistakes but you are not defined by them. And maybe by allowing yourself to want something again, instead of just existing. What if I want something I have no right to want?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What do you want, Gideon?" He turned to her, his eyes reflecting firelight, full of conflict and hope and fear. I want you, Willow. I know I have no business saying so. You will be leaving eventually, heading back to Boston and your real life. But these past weeks, working with you, talking with you, I feel alive again. Like maybe there is a future worth imagining." Willow could barely breathe. "And if I told you I did not want to go back to Boston?" That I have been falling in love with you, with this place, with the life I could build here. I would say you do not know what you are asking for. Ranching is hard work and lonely. The winters are brutal, summers are worse. You would be giving up everything you worked for. No. I would be choosing what I want instead of accepting what others expect. There is a difference. She moved closer, close enough to see the rapid pulse in his throat. I love you, Gideon Ross. Not the idea of you, not the convenience of you. You, with all your complications and sorrow and strength. If you feel even a fraction of the same, then we have something worth exploring. He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and cupped her face in his calloused hand. I love you too. God help me, I do, but I need you to be sure, Willow, really sure. In answer, she kissed him, pouring weeks of longing into the contact. He responded with a hunger that matched her own, pulling her close, the kiss deepening until she was dizzy with it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. I am sure, she whispered. I have never been more sure of anything. They talked late into the night, making plans and promises, acknowledging obstacles but refusing to be daunted by them. Willow would complete her survey, submit her findings to the territorial governor and the Botanical Society. But instead of returning to Boston, she would stay, helping Gideon expand the ranch and continuing her research on native plants. There was a lifetime of work here, important work, and the thought of pursuing it with him filled her with fierce joy. The journey back to the ranch felt different, charged with new possibility. They rode side by side, hands occasionally brushing, stealing kisses when they stopped to water the horses or examine an interesting plant. Willow had never felt so completely herself, so utterly content. Rosa took one look at them when they arrived and smiled broadly. About time, she said in Spanish, then in English for Willow's benefit. I told you it would be interesting. News spread quickly in a small community like Seligman. Within a week, everyone knew that Gideon Ross was courting the plant scientist from back east, and opinions were decidedly mixed. Some thought it was wonderful that he had found happiness again. Others worried that a city woman would never adapt to ranch life, that he was setting himself up for heartbreak. Mrs. Chen fell firmly in the first camp. Love is rare enough, she said, helping Willow pack her belongings from the boarding house. Grab it with both hands when you find it. Willow moved into the ranch house, though she and Gideon maintained separate bedrooms, conscious of propriety despite their intentions. The days fell into a new rhythm. Mornings spent on botanical work, afternoons learning the ranch operation, evenings together planning their future. Gideon taught her to ride better, to rope cattle, to read weather patterns and water resources. In turn, she helped him see the land through a scientist's eyes, understanding the complex relationships between plants, animals, soil, and climate. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths. 2 months after their trip to the High Valley, Gideon took Willow on a ride to a spot overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. My father homesteaded this land in 1867, he said, standing close beside her. Built the first structure with his own hands, nearly died the first winter. But he was stubborn and he made it work. When he passed, he left it to me with one instruction: make it mean something. I think you have honored that. I am trying, and I think part of making it mean something is sharing it with someone who sees its value. He turned to her, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. I know we have not known each other long by conventional measures. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Willow Bryant. Will you marry me? Tears blurred her vision, but her answer was immediate. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, then kissed her with the desert sunset as witness. Willow felt the rightness of it in her bones, the sense that she had finally found where she belonged. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Rosa and her family, Mrs. Chen and her son, Sheriff Donovan, and a handful of neighbors in attendance. Willow wore a dress of cream-colored cotton trimmed with lace, with wildflowers from the high valley in her hair. Gideon stood waiting for her in his best suit, looking nervous and happy and so handsome her heart ached. The circuit preacher performed the ceremony under the cottonwood trees by the spring. When Gideon kissed her as his wife, she heard Rosa weeping happily and felt the warmth of community acceptance settling around them. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing. Willow waltzed with her new husband under the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first tentative conversations, and marveled at how much her life had transformed in just 6 months. That night in the bedroom they would now share, Gideon was gentle and patient, treating her with a reverence that made her feel cherished. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Willow felt utterly content. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "Not a single one. You. Only that I did not find you sooner." The first months of marriage brought adjustments on both sides. Willow learned the demanding rhythms of ranch life: early mornings, physical labor, the constant awareness of weather and animal welfare. There were days when she missed the intellectual stimulation of university life, the easy access to libraries and colleagues, but there were compensations. She established a formal botanical garden near the house, cultivating native medicinal plants and conducting propagation experiments. Her regular reports to the territorial governor brought attention to the region's unique flora, and she began corresponding with researchers across the country. Gideon, in turn, learned to share his space and his life. He had been alone for so long that simple things like coordinating schedules or making joint decisions required conscious effort. But he was trying, and Willow appreciated the work he put into making their marriage succeed. One evening in late autumn, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Willow broached a subject they had been avoiding. "Have you thought about children?" She felt him tense beside her, knew he was thinking about Catherine, about the baby he had lost. "I have, and it scares me." "It scares me too, but I think letting fear make our decisions means we have already lost something important." He was quiet for a moment. "You would want to have a baby, knowing the risks, knowing what could happen." "Life is risk, Gideon. Every day we make choices that could go wrong. But we make them anyway because the potential reward is worth it." She took his hand. "I am not saying we need to decide tonight, but I want you to know that I would like to have a family with you if you are willing to try. What if something happens to you? I could not." His voice cracked. "Then you would survive it because you are strong enough, and you would not be alone this time. You have Rosa, the community, a life you have built. But let's focus on the more likely outcome. Everything goes fine, and we get to raise a child together in this beautiful place." Over the following weeks, Gideon slowly came to terms with the possibility. They talked through his fears, made plans for how they would ensure Willow had the best medical care available. When she finally confirmed she was pregnant the following spring, Gideon's joy was tempered with terror, but he was committed. The pregnancy was not easy. The heat made Willow sick, and she struggled with fatigue and discomfort. But Gideon was attentive to the point of being overbearing, constantly worried about her welfare. Rosa took charge of managing his anxiety, sending him on errands when he hovered too much. "Men," she said, shaking her head as Willow laughed. "They think we are fragile flowers who will break. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." Willow continued her botanical work as long as she could, though she had to modify her activities. Instead of long rides into the backcountry, she focused on her garden, on writing up her research findings, on preparing the nursery. Gideon built a beautiful cradle from pine he had cut and seasoned himself, sanding it smooth and rubbing it with oil until it glowed. As autumn approached and Willow grew large and uncomfortable, they arranged for a doctor from Flagstaff to stay at the ranch for the final weeks. Dr. Margaret Whitfield was a rare breed, a woman physician who had trained in New York before moving west to serve communities with limited medical care. "Your husband is beside himself with worry," she observed during one of her examinations, "but I see no cause for concern. You are healthy, the baby is positioned well. We should have a straightforward delivery. Please tell him that. He barely sleeps anymore." Dr. Whitfield smiled. "I will try, though men rarely listen to reason when their wives are involved." Labor began on a cool October morning, just as the cottonwood leaves were turning gold. Willow tried to downplay it at first, not wanting to alarm Gideon, but he knew her too well. By midday, the contractions were strong enough that she could not hide them. Rosa took charge, banishing Gideon from the bedroom and assisting Dr. Whitfield with practiced efficiency. "You walk, you breathe, you let your body do what it knows to do," she instructed Willow. "Your baby will come when ready." The hours blurred together in waves of pain and effort. Willow heard Gideon pacing outside the door, heard his low voice asking repeatedly if she was all right. She wanted to reassure him but could barely focus beyond the demands of her body. As evening fell, Dr. Whitfield said, "The baby is crowning. Time to push, Willow. You can do this." And she did, with Rosa holding one hand and the doctor coaching her through each contraction. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a baby's cry filled the room, strong and indignant. "A boy," Dr. Whitfield announced, placing the squirming infant on Willow's chest. "Healthy lungs, all fingers and toes accounted for." "Well done, Mama." Willow stared down at her son, at his red face and dark hair, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "Can Gideon come in?" The door opened before Rosa could even move, and Gideon was there, tears streaming down his face. He approached slowly, reverently, as if approaching something sacred. "Willow, are you?" "I am fine. We are both fine. Come meet your son." He sank to his knees beside the bed, one hand carefully touching the baby's tiny head. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot." He broke down completely then, years of grief and fear releasing in racking sobs. "I was so scared. I thought I would lose you." Willow guided his hand to hold their son, watched as Gideon cradled the infant with infinite gentleness. "You did not lose me. We are here, we are whole, and we are yours." They named him Thomas Gideon Ross, after Gideon's father and in honor of new beginnings. Tom proved to be a healthy, vigorous baby who slept in reasonable stretches and seemed fascinated by everything around him. Gideon was a devoted father, constantly amazed by each tiny achievement. Willow recovered well from the birth and gradually resumed her work. She had learned to balance her research with family responsibilities, and Gideon made it easier by being a true partner. He wore Tom in a sling while doing ranch work, changed diapers without complaint, and walked the floor during fussy nights so Willow could sleep. The territorial governor's office, impressed with Willow's findings, commissioned a comprehensive botanical survey of Arizona territory. It would take years to complete, but the recognition brought funding and official support. Willow hired an assistant, a young Yavapai woman named Mary who had grown up learning traditional plant uses from her grandmother. Through Mary, Willow deepened her understanding of the indigenous relationship with the land. They spent hours discussing not just what plants did, but why certain ceremonies accompanied their use, how plants were understood as living beings with spirits rather than mere resources. Your approach is different from most white scholars, Mary observed one day as they worked in the garden. You actually listen instead of just taking. I hope so. I want to preserve this knowledge accurately, with proper credit to those who developed it over generations. My grandmother wants to meet you. She says it is time the old ways were written down before they are forgotten. The meeting with Mary's grandmother, a dignified elder named Chevaio, proved transformative. Over the course of several visits, she shared knowledge about plant medicines, preparation methods, and the spiritual aspects of gathering. Willow documented everything meticulously, with Chevaio's explicit permission and input on what could be shared publicly versus what should remain within the community. Gideon supported this work fully, even hosting gatherings at the ranch where Yavapai elders could meet with Willow and Mary in a comfortable setting. He had worked to build relationships with the indigenous communities over the years, recognizing that they had far more right to the land than he did. This country was theirs for thousands of years before we arrived, he told Tom one evening as they sat watching the sunset, the baby babbling contentedly in his arms. The least we can do is learn from them, honor their knowledge. Tom's first birthday arrived with surprising speed. They celebrated with a small party, marveling at how much he had grown and changed. He was walking now, getting into everything, exploring his world with fearless enthusiasm. He has your curiosity, Gideon told Willow, watching their son examine a pine cone with intense concentration. Going to be a handful. He has your stubbornness, so we will have our work cut out for us. Life settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable, even joyful. The ranch prospered, Willow's research gained recognition, and their family grew when Willow discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Gideon's anxiety was tempered with experience. He still worried, but he trusted more in Willow's strength and Dr. Whitfield's skill. Their daughter was born on a spring morning 2 years after Tom, arriving so quickly that Dr. Whitfield barely made it in time. They named her Catherine Rose, honoring Gideon's first wife and marking a final piece with the past. Catherine would have wanted this, Gideon said softly, holding his daughter while Willow rested. She would have wanted you to be happy to move forward. I think I finally believe that. As the children grew, the ranch became a hub of activity. Tom showed early interest in animals and the land, following his father everywhere, absorbing lessons about ranching and responsibility. Catherine, or Cat as they called her, had her mother's scientific mind, collecting specimens and asking endless questions about how things worked. Willow's botanical survey was published in 1892 to significant acclaim, establishing her as a leading expert on southwestern flora. But she never sought positions back east, never considered leaving the life she had built. The ranch was her laboratory, the desert her classroom, and she could not imagine a better setting for her work. Through it all, her relationship with Gideon deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, moments of frustration and friction. But they had also learned to communicate, to prioritize their partnership, to choose each other again and again. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Tom and Cat play in the fading light, Gideon took Willow's hand. "Do you remember when you first showed up here, demanding I guide you through the backcountry?" "I did not demand. I politely inquired." He laughed. "You were terrifying. This tiny Eastern woman with a university degree and absolutely no idea what she was getting into. I thought you would last maybe a week before running back to civilization. And instead, I stayed and turned your life upside down. Best thing that ever happened to me." He kissed her hand. "You showed me it was possible to love again, to build something new without erasing what came before. You gave me a future worth living. You did the same for me. I was so busy trying to prove myself that I had forgotten to actually live. You taught me that being true to myself meant accepting all of it, the scientist and the woman, the ambition and the desire for connection. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children and the fading light. Willow thought about the telegram that had arrived over a decade ago, the decision to travel west alone, the nervousness and excitement of stepping off that train in Seligman. She could not have imagined then where that choice would lead, but she would not change a single moment. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. A drought year tested the ranch's resources, but they implemented water conservation techniques that Willow developed based on how native plants managed limited moisture. Tom grew into a responsible young man who loved ranching as much as his father. Kat's passion for science led to her attending university, though she always came home for summers to help with research. Mary became not just a colleague but a dear friend, eventually taking over management of the botanical garden when Willow's time grew more limited. Together, they had trained several young Yavapai women in both traditional knowledge and scientific documentation, ensuring that indigenous expertise would be preserved and honored. Gideon's hair turned silver, and Willow's hands developed arthritis that made detailed illustration difficult. But they were healthy and active, still riding out together when possible, still finding new things to discuss and explore. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Gideon took Willow back to the High Valley where he had first told her he loved her. It took longer to make the journey than it once had, but the place was unchanged. The same spring feeding the marsh, the same incredible diversity of plant life, the same sense of peace. 20 years, Willow said, settling beside him on a fallen log. How did that happen so quickly? Time moves faster when you are happy. He pulled out a small package wrapped in paper. I am not much for fancy gifts, but I made you something. Inside was a journal, hand-bound with leather. Gideon had tooled himself. The pages were thick, high-quality paper, perfect for botanical illustrations. On the first page he had written in his careful script, "For Willow, who taught me that roots can grow deep in unexpected soil. Love always, Gideon." Tears filled her eyes. "It is perfect, thank you. I figured you could use it for a new project. Or maybe for writing down your own story, what you have learned over the years." "Our story," she corrected. "Everything I have learned, I learned with you." They stayed in the valley for 3 days, recapturing something of their younger selves, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. When they returned to the ranch, both felt renewed, ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. Tom married a woman from Flagstaff, a school teacher named Sarah who loved the ranch and quickly became part of the family. Within a year, they made Willow and Gideon grandparents to twin boys who reminded everyone of Tom at that age, curious, energetic, and fearless. Kat completed her degree in botany and accepted a position at a university in California, but she visited often, and her research built directly on Willow's foundational work. She never married, declaring herself perfectly content with her plants and her studies, much to Willow's secret amusement. "She is exactly like you were," Gideon said, watching Kat explain some complex botanical concept to her nephews. "Brilliant, independent, slightly terrifying. I married you, did I not? So I could not have been that independent. You married me because I was smart enough to let you be exactly who you are. Best decision I ever made." As Willow moved into her 50s, she began training the next generation more actively. She taught workshops on botanical documentation, on sustainable harvesting of medicinal plants, on the importance of preserving indigenous knowledge. Her work had inspired others, and she watched with pride as young scientists, both native and white, built on what she had started. One afternoon, sorting through old papers, Willow came across her original notes from that first trip to the High Valley. She had been so green then, so uncertain despite her education. Reading her younger self's observations, she could trace the evolution of her thinking, see how experience and love had shaped her understanding of this landscape. Gideon found her with tears on her cheeks. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. I was just thinking about how far we have come, how much has changed. That young woman who stepped off the train in Seligman, she would be amazed at how her life turned out. Would she be happy with it?" Willow smiled. "She would be overjoyed. Terrified, probably, but overjoyed." That evening, they gathered the whole family for dinner. Tom and Sarah with their 4 children now, Kat visiting from California, Rosa's grown grandchildren who had been part of their extended family for years, Mary and her family, even a few of Gideon's ranch hands who had become like sons to him over the years. Looking around the table at the faces she loved, at the family they had built through blood and choice, Willow felt overwhelming gratitude. She had come west to study native plants and had found roots worth putting down, a love worth building a life around, a purpose that extended far beyond what she had imagined. Gideon caught her eye across the table and smiled, that same smile that had first cracked his careful defenses decades ago. In it, she saw everything they had been through together, the grief and healing, the challenges and triumphs, the ordinary moments that had woven themselves into an extraordinary life. After dinner, as the children played and the adults talked, Gideon pulled Willow aside. "Want to take a walk?" They strolled through the property as the sun set, past the botanical garden where evening primrose was just beginning to bloom, past the spring where they had been married, out to the overlook where he had proposed. The ranch spread below them in the gathering dusk, lights beginning to glow in windows, smoke rising from chimneys. "When I think about what my life would have been without you," Gideon said quietly, "it terrifies me. I would have survived, I suppose, but I would not have truly lived." Willow leaned into him, his arms secure around her shoulders. "I feel the same. I came here looking for plants, for scientific validation. What I found was so much more. I found home. I found purpose. I found you. Do you have any regrets? Things you wish you had done differently?" She considered the question seriously. "No. There were hard moments, times when I questioned myself, but all of it led here to this. I would not trade this life for anything." They stood in comfortable silence as stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, that had watched over them through all the years since. In the distance, Willow heard the children laughing, heard the sounds of family and home. The desert wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying scents of creosote and dust and possibility. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote sang and another answered. The land endured, constant and wild and beautiful. "Come on," Gideon said finally. "Let's go back. Rosa made her special cake, and if we do not hurry, the grandchildren will eat it all." They walked hand in hand through the darkness, back toward the warm glow of the house where their family waited. Willow thought about the young woman she had been, stepping off that train with her leather satchel and her determination and her fear. She wished she could tell that younger self that the risk would be worth it, that the unknown would become beloved, that the roots she put down would grow into something strong and enduring. But perhaps that younger Willow had known, on some level, that this was possible. Perhaps that was why she had been brave enough to accept Gideon's offer, to venture into the backcountry, to open her heart when she had not been looking for love. The desert had taught her patience, had shown her that beauty and strength often came from harsh conditions, that the ability to adapt was the key to survival. She had adapted, had learned to thrive in this place that was so different from everything she had known. And in doing so, she had found herself. Inside, the house was warm and bright with lamplight and laughter. Tom was teaching his oldest son to play guitar, the hesitant notes mixing with conversation and the clatter of dishes being cleared. Kat was deep in discussion with Mary about some botanical question, their heads bent together over a specimen. The grandchildren were building an elaborate fort from blankets and furniture, their imagination turning the living room into a castle or a ship or whatever world they had created. Rosa emerged from the kitchen with coffee, her hair now completely white, her face creased with decades of smiles. "Senora Willow, Senor Gideon, come sit. The cake is ready and the children are impatient." They gathered around the big table Gideon had built when Tom was born, knowing they would need space for family gatherings. Willow looked at each face, storing the moment in her memory, this particular configuration of people she loved, this specific quality of light, this exact feeling of contentment. The cake was perfect, as Rosa's cakes always were. The children got frosting everywhere and begged for seconds. The adults talked and laughed and told stories, some true and some embellished, all precious. This was what she had built, Willow thought, not just the botanical garden or the published research or the preserved knowledge, though those mattered. This web of love and connection, this family that stretched across cultures and backgrounds, this home that welcomed anyone who approached with an open heart. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed or back to their own homes, Willow and Gideon prepared for sleep with the comfortable efficiency of long practice. She brushed out her hair, now more silver than brown, while he checked the locks and banked the fire. "Another good day," he said, settling into bed beside her. "The best kind of day. The ordinary kind that you do not appreciate until you look back and realize they were the foundation of everything." He pulled her close, her head fitting perfectly into the curve of his shoulder as it had for decades. "I love you, Willow Ross, more now than I did on our wedding day, though I would not have believed that possible. I love you too. Thank you for showing me how to put down roots, for teaching me that home is not a place but a choice you make every day." They drifted toward sleep, safe in each other's arms, the desert night quiet around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions to explore, new moments to cherish. But tonight was perfect, complete unto itself. In the darkness, Willow smiled, thinking of all the years stretching behind them and the unknown time still ahead. Whatever came, they would face it together, their roots tangled deep in this red earth they both loved, their branches reaching toward the same sky. The desert wind sang outside the window, a lullaby older than human memory. And in the warmth of their bed, surrounded by the life they had built, Willow and Gideon slept, content in the knowledge that they had found exactly what they had been searching for, even before they knew they were looking. Years continued their steady march, bringing the changes that time always brings. Gideon's joints grew stiff on cold mornings, though he still insisted on doing his share of ranch work. Willow's eyesight dimmed, making the detailed illustration work she loved more difficult, though she adapted by using a magnifying glass and better lighting. Tom took over more of the ranch management, bringing his own innovations while respecting the methods his father had developed. The operation expanded slightly, incorporating some of Willow's sustainable land management principles that had proven both economically viable and environmentally sound. Kat's academic career flourished, and she eventually returned to Arizona, accepting a position at the newly established university in Tucson. She visited the ranch monthly, always arriving with new research questions and an enthusiasm that reminded Willow of herself at that age. The botanical garden became a regional resource, visited by students and researchers from across the territory and beyond. Mary ran it with skill and dedication, training new assistants and expanding the collection while maintaining its scientific rigor. On Willow's 60th birthday, the territorial governor visited the ranch personally to present her with a special commendation for her contributions to botanical science and indigenous knowledge preservation. The ceremony was small, just family and close friends, exactly as she wanted it. "Your work has been transformative," the governor said, shaking her hand. "Future generations will benefit from what you have documented and preserved. Arizona owes you a debt of gratitude." Willow demurred, as always uncomfortable with formal recognition, but Gideon squeezed her hand with pride. That evening, after the guests had departed, they sat on the porch watching another magnificent sunset. "You should be proud of what you have accomplished," Gideon said. "Not many people can say their work truly mattered." "Our work," Willow corrected. "I could not have done any of it without you, without this place you built. You gave me the foundation to grow. We gave each other that. Equal partners, remember," she smiled. "Equal partners, always." The grandchildren grew, each developing their own interests and paths. Some stayed close to the ranch. Others ventured further afield, but all carried with them the lessons learned in this place. Respect for the land, appreciation for diverse knowledge, the importance of family and community. When Willow turned 65, she and Gideon took one last trip to the High Valley. It required careful planning, as neither moved as easily as they once had, but they were determined. Tom accompanied them, partly to help but mostly because he had never seen this place that meant so much to his parents. The valley was unchanged, eternal in its beauty. Willow identified the plants she had first cataloged there decades ago, showing Tom how to recognize them, sharing the stories of their properties and uses. "This is where your father first told me he loved me," she said, touching the trunk of a pine tree. "Right here, with the sunset behind us and the whole future uncertain." Tom looked between his parents, seeing the love that still burned bright after so many years. "You two have always made it look easy, but it was not, was it? Marriage, building a life together." "It was the hardest thing I ever did," Gideon said honestly. "And the most worthwhile. Love is not about easy, Tom. It is about choosing each other every day, even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult." "Your father learned to share his space and his heart after years of being alone," Willow added. "I learned to let someone in, to be vulnerable, to build something bigger than just my own ambitions. We both had to grow. But you never doubted it, never wondered if you had made a mistake." Willow and Gideon exchanged a look, and something passed between them that Tom could not quite interpret. Finally, his mother spoke. "There were moments of doubt, of frustration, of wondering if we were too different. But underneath all of that was something solid, something worth fighting for. Your father was right for me in ways I did not even know I needed, and I hope I was the same for him." "You were," Gideon said softly. "You are." They camped that night under the stars, 3 generations together in the place where it had all begun. Tom built the fire while Willow and Gideon sat close, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. "Thank you," Willow said quietly. "For what?" "For taking a chance on a stubborn botanist from Boston, for teaching me about this place, for loving me even when I was difficult, for giving me this life." Gideon kissed her forehead. "Thank you for being brave enough to stay, for seeing past my grief to who I could become, for building this with me." Tom watched his parents, filing away the image for future memory. 2 people who had weathered decades together and emerged stronger, their love visible in every gesture and glance. This, he thought, was what he wanted to build with Sarah. This depth, this partnership, this enduring commitment. The return to the ranch took longer than the journey out, but they made it safely. Willow was exhausted but happy, feeling as though she had completed some kind of circle by returning to that place one more time. The following year brought challenges. Gideon developed a persistent cough that the doctor diagnosed as lung inflammation, likely from years of breathing dust and smoke. He had to curtail his physical activities, something he resented fiercely. Willow, meanwhile, discovered a lump in her breast. Dr. Whitfield, now in her 70s but still practicing, was frank about the prognosis. "We can operate, but at your age the risks are significant. Or we can manage the symptoms and focus on quality of life. The choice is yours." After long discussions with Gideon and her children, Willow chose surgery. The recovery was difficult, draining her energy for months. But she survived, and the cancer appeared to be fully removed. During her convalescence, Gideon was devoted in his care, reading to her when her eyes tired, bringing her meals, helping her with exercises to regain strength. Their roles had reversed from when he had cared for her after the births of their children, and there was something sweet in the symmetry. "You do not have to fuss over me constantly," Willow protested when he appeared for the third time in an hour to check on her. "I know I do not have to. I want to. Let me take care of you, Willow. You have spent decades taking care of everyone else." She relented, accepting his care with grace, recognizing it for what it was. Love expressed in action. By the following spring, Willow had recovered enough to resume some of her activities. She could not do the intense fieldwork anymore, but she could tend her garden, could teach, could write. And that was enough. Gideon's cough improved with rest and better air quality in the house. They both moved more slowly now, with the careful deliberation of those who knew their bodies had limits. But they still took short rides when weather permitted, still sat on the porch each evening watching the sunset, still found reasons to laugh. Their 45th wedding anniversary arrived quietly. The family gathered, of course, but the celebration was low-key, focused on being together rather than grand gestures. Kat had compiled a book of Willow's botanical illustrations, beautifully bound, with notes from colleagues and students about her impact on their work. "You changed how we understand this landscape," one letter read. "Your insistence on incorporating indigenous knowledge revolutionized botanical documentation in the Southwest. Thank you for showing us a better way." Willow wept reading the tributes, overwhelmed by the evidence that her work had mattered, that she had made a lasting contribution. That night, alone in their room, Gideon held her while she cried. "Why are you crying? These are all wonderful things. I know. I am crying because I am happy. Because I am grateful. Because I cannot believe this is my life. Believe it. You earned every bit of it." The seasons turned, as they always did. Winters were harder now, the cold settling into their bones and refusing to leave. They spent more time indoors, reading and reminiscing and enjoying the slower pace. Willow began writing her memoirs, not for publication necessarily, but as a record for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She wanted them to know her story, to understand how she had gotten from Boston to this ranch, from lonely scholar to beloved matriarch. Gideon read the pages as she completed them, occasionally offering corrections or additions. "You are too modest here," he would say. "That discovery was groundbreaking. Give yourself credit. And you are leaving out how terrified you were during my labor with Tom," she countered. "Rosa told me you wore a path in the floorboards from pacing. I was convinced I was going to lose you. That is not modesty, that is trauma." They laughed about it now, the fear transformed by time and happy outcomes into something they could examine without pain. One evening, working on a particularly difficult section about her decision to stay in Arizona rather than return to Boston. Willow asked Gideon, "Do you think I gave up too much? I could have had a position at a major university, could have worked with the best minds in the field." He considered the question seriously. "I think you would have been miserable. You needed space to think, land to explore, freedom to pursue your interests without academic politics. And yes, you needed me and this family, though I know that is selfish to say. It is not selfish if it is true. I needed all of it, the work and the love, the challenge and the stability. I could not have been happy with just one or the other. Then you made the right choice. We made the right choice, together." As they moved into their 70s, both Willow and Gideon faced the reality that their time was finite. They had lived rich, full lives, but the end would come eventually. Rather than avoid the topic, they discussed it frankly. "I want to be buried here," Gideon said. "On the ranch under the cottonwoods by the spring. With you when the time comes." "Yes, that feels right. This is home. We should rest here." They made arrangements, ensuring their wishes were documented, making things as easy as possible for Tom and Kat when the time came. It was practical, but also liberating, removing the weight of unspoken fears. Willow's 73rd birthday arrived on a perfect spring day. The desert was in bloom, carpeted with wildflowers after an unusually wet winter. The family gathered, 4 generations now, with Tom and Sarah's grandchildren running around alongside Kat's newly adopted daughter. Looking at the children playing, their laughter bright in the clear air, Willow felt profound peace. This was legacy, she thought. Not just the research or the publications, but these lives, these connections, this love that rippled outward in ways she could not fully measure. That evening, she and Gideon sat on their porch as they had thousands of times before. The sunset was spectacular, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. "What are you thinking?" Gideon asked, seeing her distant expression. "I am thinking that if I died tomorrow, I would die happy, satisfied with the life I lived, grateful for every moment. Please do not die tomorrow." "I am not ready," she smiled. "I am not planning on it, but when the time comes, I want you to know that this life, our life, it was everything I could have hoped for and more." "Same, Willow, same." They sat in comfortable silence until the stars emerged, until the night birds began their songs, until Rosa called them in for dinner. And they rose together, supporting each other as they had for decades, and walked toward the light and warmth of home. The years that followed were gentle, a gradual slowing rather than a sudden stop. Willow continued her writing, compiled her research into a comprehensive volume that would become the definitive botanical reference for the region. Gideon spent time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, teaching them about ranching and land stewardship. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a large gathering that brought people from across the territory. Fellow scientists, members of the Yavapai community, old friends, extended family. It was a testament to the lives they had lived, the bridges they had built, the respect they had earned. During the party, Mary presented them with a gift from the Yavapai Council. A beautiful blanket woven with traditional patterns, along with a formal adoption into the tribe. "You are family," the council representative said. "You have honored our knowledge, respected our people. We claim you as our own." Willow and Gideon were both moved to tears by the recognition, understanding its deep significance. As they moved deeper into their 70s, the outside world changed rapidly around them. The automobile arrived in Arizona, telephone lines stretched across the desert, the territory inched closer to statehood. But the ranch remained largely the same, an anchor point in a shifting landscape. Willow's health began to decline more noticeably in her 78th year. The old cancer returned, and this time, she chose comfort measures over aggressive treatment. She wanted whatever time remained to be peaceful, spent with family rather than in doctors' offices. Gideon was devastated but tried to hide it, wanting to be strong for her. Willow saw through the facade and called him on it one morning. "I need you to be honest with me about what you are feeling. Not brave, not stoic. Honest." So he told her that he was terrified of losing her, that he could not imagine life without her, that the thought of being alone again made him want to rage at the unfairness of it all. "I have had 52 years with you," he said, voice breaking, "and it is not enough. It will never be enough." "I know. I feel the same, but Gideon, we have been so blessed. Look at what we built together. Look at our children, our grandchildren. Look at the work that will outlast us both. We have made something that matters. I know. I just wish we had more time." "Me too. But I would rather have 52 years with you than 100 years with anyone else." They made the most of the time remaining, taking short walks when Willow felt strong enough, sitting in the garden, reading to each other, talking about everything and nothing. The family visited often, sometimes individually, sometimes in groups, everyone wanting to spend time with Willow while they could. On a warm October evening, surrounded by her family, Willow asked everyone to gather in the living room. She was weak but determined, propped up with pillows, Gideon beside her holding her hand. "I want to say some things while I still can," she began, her voice soft but clear. "To all of you, thank you. Thank you for the love, the laughter, the privilege of being part of your lives. Tom, you made me a mother and taught me a kind of love I had not known existed. Kat, you showed me that my passion could continue into the next generation. To all my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, never stop asking questions, never stop learning, never stop fighting for what matters." She paused, gathering strength. "This land, this place, it deserves our respect and protection. Take care of it, honor the knowledge of those who came before, and pass it all forward. That is how we create something that endures." There was not a dry eye in the room. Gideon's shoulders shook with silent sobs, but he held tight to her hand. "And to my husband," Willow continued, looking directly at Gideon, "thank you for showing me how to put down roots, how to build a home, how to love with my whole heart. You made me better than I was. I love you more than I have words to express." "I love you too," Gideon managed. "Always." That night, as they lay in bed together for what they both knew would be one of the last times, Gideon asked, "Are you afraid?" "A little. But mostly I am grateful. For all of it, even the hard parts. They brought me here to you, to this life. I would not change a thing. When you are gone, what should I do? Live. Keep the ranch going, spend time with family, maybe finally teach Tom that secret recipe for your barbecue sauce. And know that I will be here in the garden, in the land, in everything we built together. That is not the same as having you here. No, but it is something. Hold on to it." Willow passed peacefully 3 weeks later on a November morning with the first frost sparkling on the ground. She died in the bed she had shared with Gideon for over 50 years, surrounded by family with his hand in hers. Gideon was shattered by the loss, the grief he had feared consuming him utterly. But he was not alone this time. Tom and Sarah moved into the main house temporarily, managing things while Gideon worked through his sorrow. Kat took a leave from the university to be present. The community rallied, bringing food and comfort and shared memories. They buried Willow under the cottonwoods as she had wished, in a simple ceremony that honored both her scientific contributions and her deep connections to the land and its people. Mary led a Yavapai blessing, acknowledging Willow's spirit and her lasting impact. In the weeks that followed, Gideon went through Willow's papers, organizing them as she had requested. He found notes for projects she had been planning, sketches of plants she wanted to study further, letters from colleagues and students expressing gratitude for her mentorship. And he found a letter addressed to him, sealed and marked to be opened after I am gone. With shaking hands, he broke the seal and read, "My dearest Gideon, if you are reading this, I am gone and you are grieving. I wish I could spare you this pain, but death is part of life, and we both knew this day would come. I need you to know that loving you, being your wife, building our life together, was the greatest joy of my existence. You gave me everything I needed and so much I did not even know to want. You were my partner, my best friend, my greatest adventure. Now I need you to do something for me. Keep living. Not just existing, but truly living. Spend time with our children and grandchildren. Keep the ranch going, or let Tom take it over completely if that feels right. Continue the botanical work or let it rest. Whatever brings you peace, do that. But please do not retreat into grief and isolation. You did that once before, and I cannot bear the thought of you living that way again. You have so much love to give, so much still to contribute. The world needs you. Our family needs you, and I need you to be all right. Know that our love does not end with my death. It lives on in Tom and Kat, in every grandchild and great-grandchild, in the garden and the ranch, and the work we did together. I am part of all of it, and therefore never truly gone. Thank you, my love, for 52 extraordinary years. Thank you for taking a chance on a stubborn botanist who showed up demanding your help. Thank you for teaching me about roots and home and love that endures. Until we meet again in whatever comes after, your Willow." Gideon read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Then he carefully folded it and placed it in his breast pocket, close to his heart. Over the following months, he slowly found his way forward. He threw himself into ranch work, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms. He spent time with Tom and his family, with Kat when she visited, letting their love fill some of the emptiness Willow had left. He visited her grave daily, bringing flowers from the garden she had loved, talking to her about the day's events, sharing his thoughts and fears and small triumphs. It helped somehow, maintaining that connection even though she could not respond. A year after Willow's death, Gideon finally completed a project he had been planning. A formal memorial garden incorporating all of Willow's favorite plants, with a bench overlooking the view she had loved. A plaque explained her contributions to botanical science and indigenous knowledge preservation, ensuring that visitors would understand the significance of what had been accomplished there. The dedication ceremony brought people from across the Southwest: scientists, indigenous elders, former students, family, and friends. They shared stories about Willow, celebrated her legacy, and planted a new tree in her honor, a cottonwood sapling that would grow tall and strong, sheltering future generations. As the sun set that evening, Gideon sat on the new bench, surrounded by blooming plants and birdsong. He felt Willow's presence strongly, could almost hear her voice commenting on the various species, pointing out interesting details. "We did good, did we not?" he said aloud. "Built something that mattered." The wind rustled through the leaves, and Gideon chose to interpret it as agreement. He lived another 5 years after Willow's death, good years filled with family and purpose. He saw Tom's children grow and marry, held new great-great-grandchildren, watched the botanical garden expand under Mary's continued leadership. On a spring morning, shortly after his 82nd birthday, Gideon sat on the porch watching the sunrise and simply did not get up again. Tom found him there, peaceful and still, a slight smile on his weathered face. They buried him beside Willow, under the cottonwoods, in the land he had loved for over 60 years. The ceremony was large, acknowledging a life well lived and a love that had transformed everyone it touched. And there they rested together, Willow and Gideon, their names carved in simple stone, their legacy growing all around them in gardens and grandchildren, in preserved knowledge and protected land, in a love story that would be told and retold for generations. The ranch continued under Tom's management, incorporating the lessons both his parents had taught: respect for the land, honoring indigenous knowledge, sustainable practices that would allow the operation to endure. The botanical garden became part of the state university system, ensuring permanent protection and funding for ongoing research. Kat eventually donated her mother's papers and illustrations to a major research library, where they were cataloged and made available to scholars worldwide. Willow's comprehensive botanical survey remained the definitive reference work for southwestern plant species, cited in countless subsequent studies. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, people at the ranch would swear they saw two figures walking hand in hand through the garden, pausing to examine the flowers, sitting together on the memorial bench, eternal in their love and their connection to this place. The story of Willow and Gideon became part of the land's history, a testament to what could be built when two people were brave enough to put down roots in unexpected soil, to choose love over fear, to create something that would outlast them both. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the ranch, still tend the botanical garden, still honor the indigenous partnerships that Willow and Gideon established. The land endures as it always has, and with it, the legacy of a botanist from Boston and a rancher who showed her that home is not where you are from, but where you choose to plant yourself and grow.